All right, so Jay Z has filed his motion to dismiss the lawsuit filed against him. As you know, both him and Puff have been named in a civil lawsuit in which a 38-year-old woman, now she was 13 at the time, she alleges that when she was 13 years old, she was raped by both Puff and Jay at a VMA Awards after party. And so Jay Z and his legal team have been very aggressive in trying to make this go away. And they've filed yet another motion to dismiss. We're going to break down some of the arguments in that motion. And so I want to welcome you back if you've watched some of my videos before. If you have not, my name is Jamahl Kersey. I'm a criminal defense attorney and I've been practicing law for over 15 years. And on this channel, we're breaking down legal concepts so you're in the know. And before I get into my analysis, I just want to say a special thank you to Timothy King, to DNR, and to Rosetta Springer. They all dropped me some super thanks, and I'll just say, you know, I'm not above receiving gifts. And so I just want to say thank you so much for blessing me with those. I really do appreciate it. All right, so let's get into it. So there have been a lot of comments about Jay Z and his legal team and how aggressive they've been with the filing of these letters and these lawsuits. And, you know, they went so far that even the judge commented on their conduct. And there's been a lot of judgment from, you know, the court of public opinion, right? You know, people are saying, you know, it's given guilty vibes, or he looks suspicious by filing all these papers. Listen, it is so easy. It's so easy to be judgmental when it's not you or someone you love in a situation where you are facing allegations and your position is that you didn't do anything wrong. And I'm looking at this case, you know, I look at everything through the lens of, you know, a person who is trained legally, right? And who is a criminal defense attorney. And really, when it comes to this case, even though it's a civil case, right? There are no criminal charges attached to this case. As far as I know, there has been no criminal investigation. There is no law enforcement agency that is doing any sort of investigation in this case. So this is just a civil case. However, given the nature of the charges, or of the allegations, this would be criminal, right? And I mean, it is criminal, right? The allegations, what we're talking about, a rape, whether it's a rape of anybody, let alone a 13-year-old girl, this certainly would be criminal, and it would be something that somebody would be facing a lot of years in prison over. And so that's the lens that I'm looking at this through. And especially given just the nature of it, right? You know, it does not get much more ugly. It doesn't get much more heinous and vile than violating a child, right? And so I cannot sit here and just assume that he did this. I can't assume that Puff did this. And it's very alarming to me and actually scary how many people are just like, you know, casually saying in comment sections, yeah, Jay did that shit, or yeah, Puff did that. Like, we haven't seen any evidence whatsoever. On the contrary, there's a lot of issues with this case, and yet people are just flippantly willing to make the leap and say that they did these things. As for me, I am looking at this as both of these individuals are innocent unless and until they are proven guilty. And even more so when we look at what has unfolded in this particular case. And I'll just say this, if you are one of those people who have jumped to conclusions and are judging Jay, and we'll leave it at Jay because this is his motion versus Puff, but if you are judging him, I would just say, be careful, right? Because the chances are either you or someone you love, someone close to you, at some point in your life, one of you are going to be accused, and I hope it never happens, but the chances are that at some point you're going to be accused of something, or someone you love is going to be accused of something that they did not do. And when you look at everything around, it's going to seem to the contrary, right? There's going to be witnesses saying things. There's going to be a prosecutor aggressively pursuing a case. And in that moment, you want the best lawyer you can afford, or if you can't afford an attorney, you want the best, most passionate public defender that you can be assigned to, and you want them to do everything in their power. You want them to do everything that they can to clear your name. And so, like I said, it's just so easy to be, you know, tough on crime and law and order when it's not you or yours. But it's, I see those same individuals when, something comes down and it's them or someone that they love, the tune changes up. So I would just be careful with that stance if you are taking that stance. And I'll just say, in our criminal practice in the last year, we've had a lot of major cases. I'm thinking of two in particular. One was a kidnapping case and one was a child abuse case. Starting with the child abuse case, the DA had charged felony abuse charges against my client, saying that he caused some pretty serious injuries to his infant son. And, even there was information from the reviewing physician. You looked at the evidence and you would say, based on the reviewing physician's expert opinion, the way that the DA was so aggressively pursuing this case, you would think that my client did exactly what he was alleged to have done. However, we were able to have a separate independent expert who was more specialized in this particular area. And he was able to give an opinion and say, no, these type of things happen all the time. It's purely accidental. In fact, he was kind of a jerk. The lawyer, the expert was kind of a jerk and was saying you almost have to be idiotic to look at this and think that, this was a sign of abuse. But if our client didn't have the resources to hire a legal team to thoroughly be able to go through the evidence to the extent that we did, and be able to bring on an expert to be able to provide the analysis, then I'll tell you, the DA was so adamant that our client had done what he was being charged with when he really had not. And so fortunately, we were able to get that case dismissed. And in the kidnapping case, everything signs pointed to our client having kidnapped a woman. She said that he did this, and there were witnesses who said one thing, but then, and it was a significant amount of time later. It might have been a year later, where our defense investigator was able to go back and talk to the witnesses, and basically the way they had said what they said to the police kind of twisted and manipulated their words, and our defense investigator was able to uncover what this couple really meant when they said what they saw. And in doing that investigation, in getting our client's side of the story and doing some other stuff to show why the alleged victim lied in that case, we were able to demonstrate, hey, this did not happen and you need to do the right thing and dismiss this case. And so in both of these cases, when you look at the evidence, when you look at the complaint, when you look at what the alleged victim said, you would think that our clients were guilty, but they absolutely were not. So me personally, I don't take the fact that someone said, oh, he did this to me, or someone said she did this to me, or this happened. I don't take that, as the gospel truth. I don't take as the gospel truth that the government decided to file a complaint and put allegations in a complaint. So you shouldn't either, right? You should wait until you've seen all of the evidence and then be able to form an opinion. You should not jump to a conclusion about any of this stuff. So that's my preamble to what I have to say. And I just think that's really important to take into consideration. But Jay-Z and his legal team have filed this motion to dismiss. And what they're basing it on is the idea that a lawyer, when you file a complaint, right, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a complaint alleging any sort of sexual assault or rape or anything like that. It could just be, a business dispute or anything like that, right? But when you file a complaint, when you affix your name to a complaint, before filing that complaint, you're supposed to conduct what's considered a reasonable investigation and inquiry into the facts. And so then when you file that complaint, you are basically saying that, hey, I either believe that what is in this complaint is going to be supported by evidence that I already have, or evidence that I will eventually obtain through the discovery process. And just briefly, if you don't know what the discovery process is, it's, in a civil case, after a lawsuit is filed, there's an exchange of information. There can be exchange of documents, exchange of photographs, there's questions, right? So it's how you get to know the other side's case, and it's how you are able to gather more information in order to support your case. And so you can say, hey, this is what I believe will ultimately be able to approve. And maybe I don't have the evidence, but I know through the discovery process, I'm going to be able to get it, right? And so that's the thing. When you file a complaint, then you're supposed to be able to assert that. And you're not supposed to file a complaint without having made a reasonable investigation and inquiry into the facts, right? So, we've decided, the legislature has, we of the people through the legislature have written these statutes saying that it's not fair for people to just file frivolous lawsuits against other people, right? You shouldn't be the subject of a lawsuit and have to go through timely and costly and stressful litigation when there's no evidence whatsoever supporting that person's claim. And so what Alex Spiro and Jay Z and the legal team are saying is that Tony Buzbee in this case has violated this particular rule because they did not conduct this reasonable inquiry, and they've basically asserted some extremely ugly, heinous allegations against Mr. Carter, and they are absolutely false. And so one of the arguments is that, again, these are false allegations. The other thing is that, he didn't conduct this inquiry. And the other thing is ultimately, once he was made aware of this large number of inconsistencies in this case, then he had a duty to then withdraw the complaint, right? And that doesn't mean that the complaint just goes away forever, but it's just like, okay, we have serious doubt now as to whether what we originally thought to be true actually is true. And so we're going to withdraw this complaint, and then you can refile if you then do the inquiry that you should have done from the start, right? If you then are satisfied that you have enough evidence, or you eventually will have enough evidence, then you can refile. And so what Alex Spiro is arguing in his motion is that the failure to withdraw at this point, despite being presented with evidence that this case is BS, that's a violation of the rule. And so then we get back into what you've already heard at length in terms of what these inconsistencies are, right? If the parties who are alleged to have done a particular thing in this situation, Puff and Jay, if this is supposed to have happened at this large white residence within 20 minutes of Radio City Music Hall by car, right? With the gated U-shaped driveway. That's where this alleged rape is supposed to have occurred. However, there's documented evidence in the way of photographs showing that Puff and J-Lo were at a nightclub, that Jay was at Lotus nightclub. It doesn't exist anymore, but that was a nightclub in New York. He's photographed as being there. If they are at a club, then this could not have happened in the way that the plaintiff is saying, because they weren't at this residence that she describes, right? The other thing is, if they're at a nightclub, right, that's going to be 21 and up, and her as a 13-year-old, I'm sorry, good luck getting into a New York nightclub at 13 years old. Then we have the issue, which I think is probably one of the biggest issues, and that's the whole thing with the dad, right? The dad just not being able to recall this situation, right? And it is something that, I'm sorry, there's no way as a dad that you could forget something like this, right? If you live in Rochester, New York, and in order to get to New York City, it is a 5-hour drive there, and you're picking up your daughter who is clearly, visibly distraught and, traumatized and just torn apart by what just happened to her, right? And then you pick her up, and then you drive her all the way back to Rochester, New York, and you've driven 10 hours in a vehicle. That is not anything that you would ever forget in your life as a father. At least that's what the position that the defense is taking, and that's a reasonable argument to make. But yet, when when the NBC correspondents followed up with the dad to ask him about if he remembered such a trip, picking up his daughter under these conditions, like, I don't remember this, and I feel like that's something that I would remember. I agree with that. And so, the fact that he just doesn't remember making this drive certainly calls into question the legitimacy of what the plaintiff is arguing. Then we have the conversations again with the celebrities at the party, particularly Benjamin Madden. We've heard at length that, she was talking to him and was admiring his tattoo. But it turns out that Benji Madden was along with his band, Good Charlotte, in the middle of the country, apparently in Chicago on tour. And so if he's in Chicago on tour, there's no possible way that he would be in New York. And so this conversation is made up. And again, when you have somebody who is making up something or lying about what happened to them or just what happened in general, then it's going to be the fringe details where you're able to catch them up in the lies. Because again, when you look at the complaint and you see, oh, well, she was talking to all these celebrities and she went into detail about this tattoo, it just adds credibility to the story, right? Because you're able to add these details. But when you're able to when you're able to show that it is objectively provable that conversation didn't happen, then again, that causes a serious hit to this person's credibility. Then we have the allegation that she was watching the VMAs on a Jumbotron, right? And Alex Spiro and his team, they were able to get a statement. MTV, they tried to get a permit to have the Jumbotron. They were unsuccessful in getting the permit, so there was no Jumbotron. Again, this is another one of the details in the story. Again, when somebody is lying about a story or when somebody's making up something, a lot of times it's in those fringe details where you're able to expose that the main thing that they're lying about ends up getting exposed. She said that she had approached some of the limos passing by in order to try and get into one of the after parties or something to that effect. But it turns out that the way that where the limos were parked, that area was cordoned off. So you as a member of the public would not have just been able to walk up to limos in the way that she said happened. So again, we have another instance and when they're able to pick apart one of the details that she puts in there. And so one of the other major issues, besides the dad not remembering, is the fact that there are no corroborating witnesses whatsoever. 24, now we're going on 25 years, there's not one single person who's come out and said, yes, I was there, I saw this happen, or for her to have gone to them and said, this is what happened to me. And so the law says, as a lawyer, if you have a client who is telling you that something happened and there are no other corroborating witnesses, there's no corroborating evidence, then you as a lawyer, you have a higher obligation to thoroughly investigate and inquire to make sure that what they're telling you is true, right? So you can't just rely on hope and faith alone, because the reality is clients will lie to you. And especially when we're talking about money being involved, and especially to the tune of likely millions of dollars that somebody would be seeking to to obtain as a result of one of these type of lawsuits, then your duty to be more, to look at this with more scrutiny becomes higher. And so throughout this motion, the defense's position is that Buzbee at every turn has failed to meet his obligations to do this thorough and proper vetting. And so, they question, like, how is it that, you as a licensed attorney, you didn't conduct this investigation, you didn't thoroughly vet the facts, and we have a reporter able to poke all these holes in this case just 5 days after you filed a complaint. And that is a very strong, reasonable, and powerful argument to me that, again, a reporter just going and making some follow-up questions is able to expose all these different things, whereas you as the lawyer, because the reporter doesn't have these obligations. You as the lawyer, like I said earlier, right? You as a lawyer, before you sign a complaint, you are saying that, hey, I conducted an inquiry, and to my knowledge, information, and belief, I believe that, evidence is ultimately going to support this complaint. How could you make that representation when just 5 days after you file this lawsuit, all of these holes are exposed in the case? And so the defense's position is that, listen, you should have done this before, right? Because, Buzbee has since come out and said, hey, we will we will vet, we'll vet the facts. We'll go and do this inquiry, and we'll get this thing figured out. And it's like, no, that's what you should have done before you filed the complaint. It's not that you filed this complaint, loft these hefty, ugly, vicious, vile allegations against somebody, and then say, okay, well, yeah, we'll go ahead and inquire afterwards. No, that's supposed to happen before you file this complaint, because that's supposed to happen, again, in any type of civil case. It could just be a dispute over $10,000, right? For, whether you timely delivered rocks to a construction site, right? That could be the subject of a federal civil lawsuit, right? Did you deliver these rocks on time? Something that has nothing to do with reputation besides your business reputation for delivering stuff on time, let alone something like this, where we're talking about the alleged rape of a 13-year-old girl. You would think that you would do everything that you can going into it to make sure all of your ducks are in a row before you go and file this complaint, before you start going and doing your, press conferences and blasting your 1-800 number behind you and everything. That's what the lawyers are arguing in this. And so the interesting thing is, when NBC, when they went and spoke with Tony Buzbee, he then says that, oh, well, we got this case from another firm, and they had vetted the facts. They had vetted the allegations, right? So it's almost the sort of passing of the buck. And that's not, that firm didn't sign the complaint. You did. And so if you sign the complaint, it's your obligation to look into these things before you decide to file. And so what they're then saying is that, at this point, it's been brought to your attention, these issues, and you still haven't withdrawn this complaint, right? You could withdraw the complaint, and, while the reputational damage has been done, right? Again, there are a number, I'd probably say hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who believe that Jay-Z did these things. And so the reputational hit is done, and he may not ever be able to come back from that, right? And so, but at a minimum, to sort of mitigate the damage at this point, you could withdraw that complaint, but that hasn't happened. And so that's why at this point, the defense is asking for sanctions. So it's a really interesting situation because, again, from my perspective, if I'm looking at both Jay, both Puff being innocent unless and until they're proven guilty, if I'm seeing all these holes in this case, at this point, I'm saying this didn't happen. Unless and until I'm presented with something that actually lends a shred of credibility to this individual, then I'm assuming that this just did not happen. Now, I'm not saying that, I can't be persuaded or convinced that it did happen. Obviously, if there's other information that comes out supporting that, but no, some allegations this serious, without anything more, with this delay so long, I'm just not making that leap. But in fairness, this is the defense motion to dismiss, and Tony Buzbee and Jane Doe, they'll have their opportunity to respond to this motion and argue why this case should not be dismissed. And so we'll be waiting for that. Their opposition to the motion to dismiss is not due until later in February, so they definitely have time to do their legal research and put their motion together, and we'll review that once that gets filed. But let me know your thoughts thus far. Are you one of those people who have already assumed that Jay and Puff did this and they should be held responsible for this? Or are you like me and you're saying, no, pump the brakes on this. Let's just wait and see. We haven't seen any evidence whatsoever. And before we're going to put these allegations on this person or on these people, these are such serious allegations, we need to wait until we see some evidence. I think that's the more reasonable way to look at things, but that's just me. Well, if you got something out of this, please show me some love, hit the like button, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss a new video when it drops. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.